From, first of all, the meeting that Uhuru Kenyatta is going to be having with the House leadership today, and that the executive is going to sort of like twist, the Parliament to have them stay longer before they go on for the recess, just to vet the cabinet nominees. First of all, is that out of the ordinary, or is it a normal thing that can happen? I'll start with you, Kiriro.
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely important that we get a new cabinet as soon as possible.
All right.
And I'm not always persuaded that we get our fair share of the shake for the amount of money we pay these people in Parliament. So if they need to stay another 1 week or two,
yes.
I'm all for it.
That's okay.
I would insist on it.
All right. Yeah. Is there a hurry to have the cabinet nominees named?
If you look at the indicators that we have, look at the way the economy has taken a small dip as a result of the long electioneering period.
Yes.
If you also look at the performance of Nairobi Stock Exchange, that immediately after the first judgment of the Supreme Court, there was a dip, and then after the second judgment, Nairobi Stock Exchange was on the rise. So telling you very clearly that there is need for certainty and predictability. And definitely the politics and the long electioneering period has affected our economy. Now, you cannot run a government when an economy is... you cannot run a government effectively if an economy is not doing well. And what is needed now is certainty, continuity, and predictability. And therefore, the president moving with speed after being sworn in, for me, is the natural thing. Now, you alluded to the fact that, is it in order for them to engage Parliament?
Yeah.
It is good that if you look at the center of our constitution, the formation of government is actually the backstops with the institution of the presidency. You could see other institutions were having even a challenge moving when we had a problem with the presidency. That is an architecture of government. Now, the different arms are independent, but they should work interdependently.
All right.
So what the president therefore is doing is respecting that whereas you have your autonomy to make your own calendar, but we are serving the same very people, and for us to prosecute an agenda moving forward,
right.
I want you guys to do what? To stay longer, so that in the circumstances we are in, I want by January to have a cabinet.
All right, interesting. Kiriro, I'll ask you a political question, and could it be that, the president is, just trying to get us out of this political period that we've been having, sort of like saying it's time to move forward, considering also what the, NASA, on the other hand, is also set to be doing on the 12th of December. So is it really could it also be, for Uhuru Kenyatta to show that indeed, we have a new president and it's time for things to move on?
Absolutely. I think it is imperative that we create another atmosphere, because this electioneering took too long and the atmosphere is not conducive to business. So like he says, we need to deliberately set a new agenda and get going with. And insofar as the NASA are concerned, my personal view is that we should leave them alone to heal.
Is it possible to...
They will heal. There's a human need because of self-fulfillment. When you are disappointed, you do need time to have a dignified climb down. And that is inevitable. Whether they realize that or not, I am saying that we need to give them space, because it's like losing a baby. And you need time to mourn and climb down. But that you shall do. But, whether we realize that or not.
But, with this quote-unquote climbing down, I mean, they're set to swear in Raila Odinga on the 12th of December. Don't you think that's going to create
It is hot air.
Okay.
Nobody is going to swear anybody. That is mere hot air. I suspect that now that Uhuru Kenyatta is forming cabinet, this is the last ditch effort to say, include us too. Give us a gesture. You have said that you are going to send an olive branch. What kind of olive branch? They are playing to the gallery so that to persuade government to see how they can get... You remember this famous phrase, inclusivity, that certain people in Kenya don't feel included.
Yes.
We need to talk about what does inclusion mean. Because the common perception is that if you take somebody from the Luo community, therefore the Luo feel included. Think about it, Betty. It's a little bit silly to think that one person, once they're included, the entire community now, they may feel included, but are they really included?
I would love to say so.
Let me give you an example. If you want to include northern Kenya, then you must do the corridor, the new highway from Lamu to Turkana. You must do the rail. This is the way to include in such a way that you are affecting people's day-to-day endeavors. That's the way to include people.
So the impact is felt largely
precisely
a bigger population than just one person. But it also goes back to that.
Or the water they are doing in the dam they are doing in Ukambani. Eventually, that's what we will include the Kamba people into the mainstay of the Kenyan society.
Right.
Because one of the biggest challenges that the Kamba face is provision for water. Now, if you put Kalonzo Musyoka in cabinet and you start claiming that therefore the Kamba feel included, from where I sit, it is force.
But at the same time, when it comes to all these positions, don't you think that even with that perception that we as Kenyans have with regards to what inclusivity means, that indeed that should actually happen?
I'm not saying it shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we have to be a little more honest with ourselves and how to include the ordinary people so that the ordinary person feels that they are Kenyan, that they are included in that his activity. If he is a welder and you bring electricity to the village and now his business improves a little bit, honestly, he feels now I'm happy
included.
to be, I'm included.
Interesting.
And I would like people, I would like even the media, when we discuss these things, to reduce it to the common sense perception I'm creating, that it is a single individual's involvement in their day-to-day. What do they need? If they go to hospital, they get drugs, they feel included. If their kids go to high school, they feel included.
They feel included.
And this about education is extremely important. Now that we are talking about a new candidate, one of the persons I admire most is the current CS for education, because he is affecting not just this year, next year, but the way we ourselves, we had gone so low in terms of our values for honesty, that it is parents, middle class, your age group, that were buying exams for their kids.
Interesting.
And therefore, we were getting rotten from the very bottom. We need to start again. And this thing would take a whole generation, maybe two, to put back. Values are difficult to develop, and they are very easily lost. We need to start thinking long term.
All right. We'll come to the performance of the CSs. Vincent, what do you have to say?
I was talking to church leaders, if you could allow me, at the NCCK group, and we were discussing what is it that the churches can do when the political temperatures were high. And we said, let's go to the real issues. I spoke the way my brother has spoken. That's why I was laughing.
Yes.
And they told me, Vincent, it is okay. That's at the technical level. You're dealing with the real issues. But we have a political issue before us.
Yes.
And political issues require political responses. And then we will move to the secondary tier of dealing with the real issues, which my brother has alluded to. Now, the reality, Betty, is that the system we adopted in 2010, the presidential system, a pure presidential system, is called the spoil system, whereby you are allowed, as the person who wins, to come in and remove the people who were put in by your previous predecessor and put your own. That's allowed in a spoil system. Now, the African leadership dimension is consultative, it is deliberative. Some of us who grew up country, if you go for hunting and in the evening you get something and your friend doesn't get, you are responsible to divide. So we have a pure presidential system that then therefore you go to an election, no one else is allowed to run for another position. So you can win. Let's even look at the figures from the first election. From IUBC, President Uhuru, 8.2 million. Raila Odinga, around 7.56 million. Now, the two, that is Raila and Kalonzo, are, after the declaration, in a pure spoil system, are out of the discourse for another 5 years. They are not members of parliament like we had originally, to continue engaging. And then the leader of minority that you have, that's meant to be for the opposition, the person is exercising a delegated role. So in terms of having the original jurisdiction and impetus to run and prosecute the opposition agenda, somebody like Mbadi, I can tell you openly, will always have to go and seek referrals before he prosecutes the agenda. So what we said is that we need to tinker with our constitution so that we can see how number one and number two can either maybe go to the National Assembly or the Senate, so that then we strengthen the office of the alternative voice, that is the opposition.
Yes.
Then we also pointed out that we prosecute our politics from a community dimension. And Kenyans or communities do not feel represented in government by professionals like me and you. But they are comfortable with a politician whom they elected or not to represent them. That is why it is important for President Uhuru Kenyatta, as he constitutes his cabinet, to put those into cognizance, balancing professionalism, but also people who bring political dividends into his government.
Interesting. So we'll come back to the conversation, but for now I want to engage my colleague Murimi Mwangi, who's also been following up on this developments to do with the naming of the cabinet. Murimi, good morning. So what are we possibly looking at? Earlier on we had a story where, women representatives allied to Jubilee were asking Uhuru Kenyatta not to chase out the lazy CSs. How is he going to do this? Who's lazy, who's not, who's been working? What really are the intricacies that we'll be looking at with this naming?
Well, good morning, Betty. Well, it is an interesting time for President Uhuru Kenyatta, a critical one, so to speak, because as he names the cabinet this time round, it's more about getting the persons that will facilitate his endeavor to leave a legacy in terms of delivery in the key sectors that he has pinpointed as key to his development in his second and final term in office. Remember, his deputy William Ruto will also partly be banking on the performance of this government in the next 5 years to buttress his clamor for the presidency in 2022. But besides that, there will be so much backroom intrigues, jostle, and horse trading the search for these positions among key persons that are, of course, angling for specific cabinet secretary slots. Remember, the President Uhuru Kenyatta will be balancing between getting persons that can deliver while at the same time seeking to reward loyalty, as we have seen in previous administrations whenever the naming of the cabinet is happening. But besides that, Betty, we understand that today the speakers of the two legislative chambers, the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly, would be meeting, and the presumption or the information that we had as of yesterday was that that was to ensure that the parliament calendar can be aligned to the timelines upon which the president will be giving the names to parliament for the vetting of the nominees. Remember, parliament was to go on recess later this week. The procedure is simple. The president nominates the persons, picks the names and submits them to parliament. But then from parliament, the committee on appointments is the one that takes it over from there. Pursuant to standing order 204, I presume, the membership to that committee, of course, comprising the speaker, the deputy speaker, the leader of majority, leader of minority, their deputies, as well as not more than 22 other members that are nominated to that committee on the basis of the party strength in the House. But the opposition has said that it won't be sending any of its members, including the minority leader and his deputy, to that committee to vet the CSs, because in so doing, it would be tantamount to legitimizing the October 26th repeat presidential election, of which the opposition insists it did not take place, having boycotted that particular election. So quite an interesting time for President Kenyatta as he names his second cabinet to deliver on his pledges in his second and final term in office, Betty.
All right, Murimi, let me follow up on something that you just mentioned, and of course is the fact that NASA has said that they will not participate, in the vetting. What implication does that have, if any?
Well, the immediate implication, Betty, is that these CS nominees might not be subjected to the much thorough grilling that would be expected, of course, with the membership of the opposition in that committee. Remember, 22 is a big number for the number of MPs that will be picked from their respective political parties. Quite a number also coming from the opposition based on their membership, but also the absence of the leader of minority and his deputy in that particular committee could mean that the vetting will be happening before only Jubilee-inclined MPs, much as the MPs might want to insist that the legislature is separate and independent from the executive. Well, we have seen instances in the past where decisions in Parliament seem to be influenced by, backroom intrigues within the executive and all that. And therefore, what immediately that means is that the nominees might not be subjected to the thorough grilling that we have seen in the past naming of the cabinets. And of course, interestingly, the opposition, besides saying they won't be sending any of their members to that committee, will be having representation in the other watchdog committees. And of course, I at one point put that question to the minority leader in the National Assembly, John Mbadi, whether it was not a contradiction from their part, given that they will not be participating in the vetting of the CSs, but still want to participate in the other watchdog committees that oversight the government. And he said that their main reason for not sending members to the committee on appointments is that they do not want to seem to be legitimizing an election which the opposition insists did not take place. Betty.
Interesting, Murimi Mwangi there. Just giving us scenarios really of what to expect with Uhuru Kenyatta setting up to name his cabinet nominees and what really the implications would be, as NASA has said that they will not be participating in that vetting process. Thank you, Murimi, for that. Let me come back to my guest here in studio. And Kira, I want to start with you. First things first, what are the factors that are we likely to see Uhuru Kenyatta consider, with this naming of his cabinet? There seems to be so many things. First of all, his legacy. Then there's Uhuru Kenyatta, Deputy President William Ruto as his deputy also. I mean, so many interests here. So which is really likely to take, the biggest priority?
If I was doing it,
yeah.
Before I say, let me say it this way.
Mm-hmm.
There are two principal functions of a president, any president. Two, only two. The first one is to give people hope, is to rally people to a cause, is to inspire people, inspire and give them hope. That is the first important job and responsibility of any president. Number two is to select the people he is going to work with. If you do those two jobs well, you will succeed as president. Now, if you remember Mwai Kibaki at one point stopped talking to us completely. In fact, it's only after he left. Yes, as Kenyans. Yeah. One time he let loose his late wife, Lucy, to talk to us rather than him. He completely shut us out. It was only after he left that we realized, oh my, the old man was doing something, infrastructure, right? But he did not take up the first one of inspiring us. He had some rude words sometimes, you remember? Compared to Uhuru, Uhuru does better on that one job of inspiring. He tries. It can be refined, but it's a very important one. Kibaki, however, had a knack on the second role. He knew exactly who he wants where. And he did well on that score. I am not convinced that Uhuru is quite to the notch about who works for him, who helps him deliver. And this is why this is relevant. That's why I'm mentioning it. It is extremely important that you pick the people who will help you deliver that which you have promised. And there are some people who are better than others. Now, realizing that he will keep inspiring and giving us hope. Now, who is going to help him?
Deliver.
Exactly. He has one star in the entire cabinet. maybe a star and a half.
Yeah.
I've already mentioned Matiang'i.
Matiang'i and
Yes,
yes.
yes. And the Foreign Affairs, CS, Amina.
Mohammed.
Yeah. He needs to focus on competence. There are two issues that arise. What about regional balance?
Yes, yes.
What about political loyalty?
Inclusivity,
Yeah,
regional
exactly.
balance, yes, yes.
By God's grace, God gives talent to each and every community. If you're looking for good people, you cannot argue.
So that's not a problem.
It's not a problem.
Yeah.
If you go to Maasai territory, you will get competent Maasais. If you go to Amolo, you will get. So there is no question that if your criteria number one is competence, so that you deliver on what you are inspiring us over, you will get those people.
Interesting.
You will get them. But there is an issue of loyalty. I do not want somebody marry because they lost the elections. Even if they passed the test of competence, that they lost elections. The issue of loyalty is important because you do not want to keep looking behind yourself to see what is he doing. Yeah? So that is the reason why, there are two reasons why he shouldn't bring in NASA people at all.
Why do you say that?
We have had a situation when we had the coalition government where Raila was always saying, I have not been consulted. What is he up to? You don't want to waste energy and focus wondering what Bandi is up to or what James Orengo is up to. Because the mischief will not end.
But
They are much better off utilized as opposition people. And I would think the same lines that he was suggesting, that we set up properly within the Constitution. I've written about this, about creating space for a properly funded, public-funded shadow cabinet and the members of the top echelons of opposition belonging to the House and getting a remuneration so that they can give government a proper opposition that we have funded ourselves. So that we have a dichotomy where this one is running government, the other one is saying, you are not done well here, for these reasons we should do it this way.
Okay.
And at the same time, they are preparing to show us that they can run government. One of the shortcomings, in my view, is that when we did the devolved government, and we, at one point last electoral cycle, CORD had more governors than Jubilee. You remember? Yet, in those platforms, at the county government level, there was no evidence, none was presented anyway, that when they get to running a government, and they were running half the governments, devolved governments, that they would do any better than the other side. And this is important. We want a proper functioning opposition at the national level, funded by the exchequer. And this is the function I want them. I do not want another argument, a government that has an opposition in its midst. You remember?
Allow me to ask if my brother would use a different word. I think at this point, when Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in, he's the president of all Kenyans. In fact, one of the critical roles of a president is that is a symbol of national unity. Yes. So I'd respectively disagree with my brother that don't bring in NASA people. At this point, we don't have NASA people and Jubilee people. We have all Kenyans because the election is over. One thing I agree with him is we have to treat the winner-take-it-all presidential system so that we can have a winner serving all. So that this issue that we may not agree with the approach that NASA is taking, the issues of swearing in, it's not based on law. But I think it behooves anyone who is serving as president to ask in his team, what is it that the people who are in NASA are raising? Like now, the issues of electoral reforms. How can we ensure that we strengthen the electoral system so that any outcomes in 2022 moving forward will be embraced by all? issue of inclusivity. In my view, I am totally against the people who are pushing that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila should meet. The problem with that, Betty, is that the experience of Agenda 4 in 2007-8 period showed us that we had 4 agendas. First agenda was stop the violence. Number 2, help those who are having problems. Number 3 was the political question. You remember even the guys in Serena could not solve it. It had to take Kibaki and Raila and Kofi Annan meeting together, and a political deal was arrived at. Now, agenda number 4 was what we were talking earlier about the people, unemployment, national healing. Those issues, when the political deal was addressed, only one thing was addressed, the issue of the constitution. Now, for me, I am for a multi-sectoral approach on how do we solve our problems. Like now we say, I agree. How do we facilitate an opposition to perform their role, maybe leader of official opposition? How do we ensure that we have inclusion? And inclusion is both in terms of the real issues and also political, the optics. Finally, I want to say this on the cabinet, because we started this. Betty, I went for a meeting, two meetings. One meeting was, I was one of the key officers. The deputy president was meant to be our keynote speaker. He sent a cabinet secretary to come and read his speech. Can I tell you, that cabinet secretary just came, read the speech on a ministry. I will not say he or she because it will narrow down to the person. And the cabinet secretary just read the speech, sat down and left. No comment about what's happening in government, expounding more. The point I'm saying is this. A cabinet secretary should facilitate the president in connecting the mission of government to the people. So competence, Matiang'i, for example, is doing the job, but he's also able to effectively communicate what is happening within government on that issue. That's why when exams were being released, you did not hear the president saying, oh, my government is doing. Matiang'i did that at the technical and at the political level, and it was embraced across the country. So you need people who are able to be politically savvy, technically competent, but also loyal, as he's pointing out. So for me, Matiang'i stands out. And if I don't know, I hope if they are watching this program, this show, the president should not move Matiang'i, in my view, from the Ministry of Education to another ministry. When somebody is working, if you stop the midway, what happens? You actually see when he took over from Professor Kaimenyi, there is a difference in terms of performance. So keep that one there. And there are cabinet secretaries, I can tell you, even if it is speculative, if I give you my list, Kofi Annan gave a list to Ocampo, if you invite us after the president has announced his cabinet, they will not be there.
They will not be there.
Yes, and that we can say, I can confidently say who in this part.
Oh, really? You want to say that?
Yes, I think the...
No, we shouldn't speculate.
Okay, fine.
Let's speculate.
Okay.
Right.
When we reduce it to individuals, if somebody stands out, like Matiang'i has, it's okay to mention it.
But let me ask you...
But we should also mention people who are not
who are not standing
out.
But really, is it about standing out? Because you could find that there are CSs
it's about
who
communication,
are working,
by the way.
you know, in the undercurrents, but they are working, but maybe they do not come to the meeting as often.
I was
as
at Bomas.
Yeah.
And at Bomas, there was a debate. Do you appoint people from outside of parliament? And that is what was eventually bought. My problem was that the job of a cabinet secretary is a link between the government and the people. One critical component of that job is that you have to be able to articulate it, and communication. People underestimate the value of communication. You, the media, are powerful because you communicate. You facilitate this conversation. And anybody who acquires a position of CS must have a political sense and must be empowered in terms of communication. Those people, the best talents in communication, political communication, obviously, are in parliament. And now we have dislocated, we said, no, we will pick somebody from outside of parliament. So you can see there is a slight contradiction. It doesn't mean that technicians, Matiang'i proves it, technicians who have never been elected can have sufficient political finesse to act the job.
And work.
So that can be, it can happen. But it also means that Uhuru found himself immediately with a challenge, and he brought in 2 people. It was the Mombasa guy, Barara, and Giru. Giru has since left. Now she is governor, and she will do a fine job. Believe you me, check this out. She will do a good job.
As governor.
As governor.
Yeah.
Now I don't know where Uhuru will go. It would be a mistake, in my judgment, to take it all the way to political operatives, particularly the people who have failed. It would be a mistake.
All right.
But it is important when you do a nomination to ensure that, have you examined that they have political acumen? Because if they don't, you are up creek without a paddle. With the very people and the function I told you, who do you appoint? And that has disabused a notion that has already been mentioned here, that Parliament vets these people. That's not true. It's a lie.
What happens?
You get political approval in Parliament.
Political approval, not vetting.
Not vetting. They are not capable of vetting anyone.
No, but the law, when you look at the way the public appointments, the public appointments process, is that actually it stipulates that they will be vetted by Parliament. I think the challenge, what you're pointing out is...
If the law says vetting, the law is wrong.
So
the Parliament is not capable of vetting anyone. And I can give you a perfect example.
Oh, please go.
Is it incompetency? Why would you say that they're not
They
capable?
don't vote. They are not capable.
Okay.
Their consideration is not about your competence at all. I'll give you a clear example. There was the first person. We have a vetting process, if you call it that, that is very ineffectual. The first person to be jacked out of her job was a deputy CJ very early on in the you remember her?
Yes, yeah, Nancy Baraza.
Nancy Baraza.
Yeah.
You should know people. Those who know Nancy already knew that she has a major character fault at the personal level. And unfortunately for her, she did not hide it. It came out and knocked her out of the job. There is nobody in Parliament. Parliament is not capable of picking up character faults. They don't dare. Why? Because they themselves have major character faults. If you want a proper, if you want a proper process of
vetting,
vetting, it's called a peer review mechanism.
Okay.
If you want judges,
All
who are you going to get as judges?
All right.
If you don't go to peer review, you're wasting your time.
All right.
The people who know you best, Betty, are your age mates.
That's true. All right, so we'll take a break. We're coming back to continue the conversation here on the show, but we're going to take a break. We'll come back at the top of the hour. Don't go away.